Sign the papers, Alice. You're lucky I'm letting you keep your dignity, because you're certainly not keeping my money. Marcus slammed his hand on the mahogany table, the sound echoing through the cold, sterile lawyer's office. He smirked at his mistress, sitting in the corner, confident he was discarding a broken, penniless woman. He thought he had stripped her of every asset, every connection, and every ounce of power. He was wrong. 2 years later, at the most critical merger of his career, Marcus would walk into a boardroom, expecting to buy out a rival, only to find that the person sitting at the head of the table wasn't a stranger. It was the wife he threw away. And when the chairman read her true name aloud, Marcus didn't just panic, he froze. The air conditioning in the conference room of Sterling and Associates was set to a freezing temperature, but Alice felt like she was burning up. Across from her sat Marcus Sterling, the man she had dedicated the last 7 years of her life to. He looked immaculate in his bespoke Italian suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, his eyes cold and devoid of any of the warmth they used to hold. Next to him sat Jessica Vane, his 24-year-old public relations consultant, who was currently scrolling through Instagram, looking bored. "We don't have all day, Alice," Marcus said, checking his Rolex. "Jessica and I have a flight to the Maldives at 6. Just sign the decree. It's exactly as we discussed. You get the 2018 sedan, your personal effects, and the settlement." Alice looked down at the document. The settlement was an insult. It was a declaration of war, disguised as a legal agreement. "Zero alimony," Alice read quietly, "and a lump sum payment of $1. Marcus laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "It's symbolic, Elle. It represents exactly how much value you added to my empire. I built Sterling Tech. I wrote the code. I closed the deals. You hosted dinner parties and picked out curtains. Be grateful I'm not suing you for emotional distress for how boring the last 2 years have been." Alice's lawyer, a court-appointed generalist named Mr. Abernathy, who looked terrified of Marcus's high-powered legal team, cleared his throat. "Mr. Sterling, this is highly irregular. Alice supported you while you were in the garage phase. She paid the rent for 3 years. Under the state law of equitable distribution, equitable distribution applies to partners." Marcus cut in his voice, dropping to a menacing whisper. "Alice was a passenger, and the ride is over." He leaned forward. "If you fight this, Alice, I will bury you in legal fees. I will drag this out until you are living in a cardboard box. Or you can sign this, take your $1, and disappear." Alice didn't cry. She had cried enough 3 months ago, when she found the texts between Marcus and Jessica. She had cried when he told her he was upgrading his life, and that included his wife. Now there was only a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She picked up the pen. "There is one change," Alice said, her voice surprisingly steady. Marcus rolled his eyes. "Oh, God. What do you want the coffee maker?" "The deed to the old quarter warehouse," Alice said. The room went silent. Marcus blinked. The old quarter warehouse was a dilapidated rusting structure on the edge of the city's industrial zone. It had been part of a bad real estate portfolio Marcus had acquired years ago and never managed to sell. It was a money pit filled with asbestos and structural rot. "The warehouse," Jessica giggled. "Marcus, isn't that the place with the rats?" "It's a liability," Marcus sneered. "The taxes alone are more than you'll make in a year waitressing. Why on earth would you want that dump?" "Sentimental value," Alice lied smoothly. "We had our first fight there. It reminds me of who you really are." Marcus smirked. He grabbed the pen and scribbled an amendment on the side of the document. "Done. It's yours. Consider it a parting gift. Just don't come crawling back to me when the city condemns it and fines you into bankruptcy." He pushed the papers toward her. Alice signed. Alice Vance. She dropped the pen. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said, standing up. She didn't look at Jessica. She didn't look back at the life of luxury she was leaving behind. "Good riddance," Marcus muttered, already turning to Jessica to discuss their vacation. As Alice walked out of the glass skyscraper, the wind whipped her hair across her face. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number that she hadn't called in 7 years, a number she had promised herself she would never use. The phone rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. "Vance Residence. This is Alfred speaking." "Alfred," Alice said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's me. Tell Grandfather I'm coming home. And tell him I'm ready to take my seat." 2 years had passed since the divorce. For Marcus Sterling, they were the best 2 years of his life, or so it seemed on the surface. Sterling Tech had gone public. His face was on the cover of Forbes under the title The King of Silicon Valley. And he was engaged to Jessica. They were the it couple of the tech world, constantly photographed at galas, yacht parties, and premieres. But beneath the glossy veneer, cracks were forming. Marcus was aggressive, arrogant, and reckless. Without Alice's quiet influence, which he had never acknowledged, he had made enemies. He had fired his most competent engineers because they dared to correct him. He had burned bridges with suppliers, and now he was facing a crisis. Sterling Tech's flagship product, the AI processor Nexus, was failing. A competitor had emerged from nowhere, a shadow company called Aurelius Solutions. They were faster, cheaper, and their technology was a generation ahead. Marcus sat in his office, slamming his fist onto his desk. "Who are they? Who is Aurelius?" His CFO. A sweating man named David adjusted his glasses. "We don't know, Marcus. They're a ghost, registered in the Cayman Islands headquarters, listed as a PO box in Zurich, but they are eating our market share. We lost the Pentagon contract yesterday. They went with Aurelius. The Pentagon contract was worth $3 billion, Marcus screamed, throwing a crystal tumbler of scotch against the wall. It shattered raining glass onto the expensive carpet. "Find out who runs it. Buy them out. I don't care what it costs. I want Aurelius absorbed into Sterling Tech by the end of the quarter." "There's a rumor," David said hesitantly. "The CEO of Aurelius is notoriously private. They go by the initials EV, no photos, no interviews. No, they only communicate through legal proxies." "EV," Marcus scoffed. "Sounds like a Bond villain. Set up a meeting. I'll charm them or I'll crush them. It's what I do." Meanwhile, across the city, the atmosphere was very different. The old quarter warehouse that Marcus had so gleefully dumped on Alice was gone. In its place stood a sleek architectural marvel of glass and steel, blending modern design with the industrial history of the site. There was no sign outside, no logo, just a heavy steel gate and high-tech security. Inside the open-plan office hummed with the quiet intensity of brilliance. This was the headquarters of Aurelius Solutions. Alice stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city skyline. She looked different. The timid, pastel-wearing housewife was gone. In her place was a woman wearing a sharp, charcoal-tailored suit that cost more than Marcus's car. Her hair was cut into a sharp bob, and her posture was steel straight. She wasn't just Alice Vance anymore. She was Alice Vance Carlyle. The Vance family was comfortable, but the Carlyle family, her mother's side, was a different beast entirely. They were old money. Railroads, steel banking. The kind of money that didn't scream. It whispered, and governments listened. Alice had rejected that world to marry Marcus, wanting to build something of her own, to be loved for herself, not her inheritance. Marcus had proven that he didn't love her. He loved her utility, and when he thought her utility was gone, he discarded her. Miss Vance. Alice turned. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, stood holding a tablet. "Sterling Tech has reached out," Leo said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Marcus Sterling is demanding a meeting. He wants to discuss an acquisition." Alice walked over to the massive oak desk that dominated the room. She ran her hand along the edge. "He wants to buy us. He thinks he can," Leo said. "He's desperate. The failure of the Nexus chip is leaking to the press. Stock is down 14% this morning. If he doesn't secure a partnership with us, Sterling Tech is insolvent within 6 months." Alice laughed softly. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the laugh of a chess player who sees mate in 3. "He thinks he's coming to buy a company," Alice mused. "He has no idea he's walking into his own execution." "Shall I decline?" Leo asked. "No," Alice said, her eyes flashing. "Accept. Tell him the chairman of Aurelius will meet him, but not at his office. Here, at the warehouse. He won't recognize the address." "He never visited," Alice said coldly. "He thought it was a rat-infested dump. He's never set foot in this district since the divorce. Set the meeting for Friday. And Leo." "Yes, ma'am?" "Make sure the boardroom is cold. Freezing. I want him to feel exactly how I felt that day." Friday morning arrived with a torrential downpour, the kind of rain that turned the city into a grey, blurred smear against the car windows. Marcus sat in the back of his chauffeured Mercedes Maybach, adjusting his silk tie for the 10th time. Beside him, Jessica was busy taking a selfie, angling the phone to catch the mood lighting of the car's interior. "Babe, stop fidgeting," she murmured, checking her filter. "You're Marcus Sterling. You're going to walk in there, throw some money at this EV person, and we'll be drinking champagne by noon. Why are you so stressed?" "Because Aurelius isn't just a competitor, Jessica," Marcus snapped, looking out the window. "They are a predator. They anticipated the market shift toward quantum encrypted processing 3 years before I did. Whoever runs this company is a genius. I need to be sharp." He tapped the glass partition. "Driver, how much longer? The GPS says we should be there." "We are here, sir," the driver replied, slowing the car down. Marcus looked out the window and frowned. They weren't in the financial district. They weren't in the Tech Valley. They were in the old quarter, the grimy industrial underbelly of the city that developers had forgotten. "This can't be right," Marcus muttered. "Check the address again. 404 Foundry Lane." "This is it, sir." The car turned a corner, and Marcus's jaw dropped. He remembered this street. He remembered the potholed roads and the smell of rust. He remembered the dilapidated warehouse he had offloaded onto Alice as a cruel joke. He expected to see a rotting husk of a building, perhaps a parking lot. Instead, he was looking at a fortress. Where the crumbling brick walls once stood, a massive structure of black steel and polarized glass rose into the grey sky. It was architectural brutality, mixed with futuristic elegance. It didn't look like an office. It looked like the headquarters of a Bond villain or a government intelligence agency. There was no signage, just a subtle glowing A etched into the steel gate that slid open silently as the car approached. "Whoa," Jessica said, lowering her phone. "This place is intense." Marcus felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. It's on the old warehouse lot, he whispered to himself. Alice sold it. She must have sold it to them. Of course. She probably got a few $100,000 for the land, and Aurelius built this. The thought calmed him. Alice had cashed out. That made sense. She was likely living in a condo somewhere, spending the money he had inadvertently given her. They pulled up to the entrance. 2 security guards built like linebackers and wearing earpieces opened the car doors. They didn't smile. Mr. Sterling, Miss Vane, one of them said, please follow us. No phones allowed beyond this point. Excuse me, Jessica bristled. I have 400,000 followers waiting for an update. Company policy, the guard said, extending a hand. You can leave it in the car, or we can hold it for you. Marcus nodded at her. Do it, Jess. Don't blow this. Grumbling, she handed over her phone. They were led through a lobby that felt more like a modern art museum. High ceilings, polished concrete floors, and absolute silence. Employees moved in hushed determination. There was no chaotic startup energy here. This was the quiet confidence of absolute power. They were escorted into a boardroom on the top floor. The walls were glass, offering a panoramic view of the rain-soaked city. In the center was a table made of a single slab of black marble. The chairman will be with you shortly, the assistant said, closing the heavy door. As soon as the door clicked shut, Marcus shivered. It's freezing in here, Jessica complained, rubbing her bare arms. Why is the AC on so high? Marcus looked at the thermostat. It was set to 62 degrees. He tightened his jacket. The cold felt familiar. It felt hostile. It reminded him of the lawyer's office 2 years ago, where he had forced Alice to sign the papers. He shook the thought away. Coincidence, he told himself. Just a coincidence. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Marcus stood up and paced. This is a power play. They're making us wait to show dominance. Classic negotiation tactic. I'm bored, Jessica sighed, spinning in the expensive leather chair. And I'm cold. Can we just buy them and fire whoever set the thermostat? We're not firing the leadership, Marcus corrected her, rehearsing his pitch. We need their brain. I'm going to offer EV a position as CTO. They'll report to me. I'll give them stock options, a nice title, and I'll take the credit for their tech. It's how the world works. Suddenly, the lock on the door clicked. Marcus straightened his tie, plastered on his winning $1 million smile, and turned to face the entrance. Showtime, he whispered. The door swung open. For a moment, nobody entered. The room remained silent, the only sound the hum of the aggressive air conditioning. Then the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of high heels on the concrete floor echoed from the hallway. It was a sharp, authoritative sound, not a scuffle, not a rush, a march. A woman walked in. She was flanked by 2 lawyers and a man Marcus recognized as Leo Hertz, a prodigy developer he had tried to recruit years ago, who had turned him down. But Marcus didn't look at Leo. He couldn't take his eyes off the woman. She was wearing a tailored suit in a deep midnight blue. The fabric screamed Italian craftsmanship. She held a tablet in one hand and a file in the other. Her head was down as she walked, reading a document, seemingly ignoring the 2 people waiting for her. Apologies for the delay, the woman said, her voice cool and crisp. I was finishing the acquisition of a lithium mine in Nevada to secure our supply chain. She reached the head of the table, the seat Marcus usually reserved for himself in his own meetings, and placed the file down. Marcus frowned. The voice. It scraped against a memory buried deep in his subconscious. It sounded like, but it couldn't be. That voice was too commanding, too devoid of the desperate pleading he remembered. "We understand," Marcus said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "Business never sleeps. I'm Marcus Sterling, and I'm here to propose a merger that will redefine the industry." The woman didn't take his hand. She didn't even look up yet. She simply sat down, adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, and interlaced her fingers on the black marble table. "Sit down, Marcus," she said. Marcus froze. His hand hovered in the air, rejected. The informality caught him off guard. "I prefer to stand for the introduction," Marcus said, his smile faltering slightly. "And you must be Evie?" The woman finally looked up. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and total. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. His knees locked. Beside him, Jessica let out a small, confused gasp. The woman sitting at the head of the billion-dollar table had high cheekbones, piercing green eyes, and a sharp, sophisticated haircut. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting a strength he had never seen before. But he knew that face. He had looked at that face across a breakfast table for 7 years. He had looked at that face as he handed her a pen to sign away her life for $1. "Alice," he whispered the word, escaping his lips like a dying breath. Alice didn't smile. She didn't blink. She looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a bug under a microscope. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "Hello, Jessica. You look cold. Would you like some water?" Marcus stumbled back, gripping the back of a chair for support. What are you doing here? Is this a joke? Did you get a job as an assistant here?" He looked frantically at Leo. "Is this some kind of prank? Why is my ex-wife sitting in the CEO's chair?" Leo smiled, a predatory expression. "Mr. Sterling, you are addressing the founder and majority shareholder of Aurelius Solutions." "No." Marcus laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "No, that's impossible. Alice made pot roasts. Alice organized charity bake sales. Alice doesn't know code. Alice doesn't know business." He pointed a shaking finger at her. "She's a housewife." Alice corrected him gently. "I was a housewife, because that is what you needed me to be. You needed a prop, a cheerleader, someone to keep your life organized so you could play genius." She opened the file in front of her. "But you forgot something, Marcus. Before I was your wife, I was a double major in mathematics and logic at MIT. You forgot that I proofread your original code for the first Sterling engine. You forgot that I structured your first round of angel investment. You were so busy loving the sound of your own voice, you forgot who helped you learn to swoop." Marcus stared at her memories, flashing back. Late nights in the garage, him sleeping while she debugged lines of code. Her suggestions that he dismissed as cute but secretly implemented later. He had rewritten history in his head so thoroughly that he actually believed he did it all alone. "But the money," Marcus stammered. "I left you with nothing. $1. How did you build this? This building alone costs $50 million. Alice leaned forward. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "The warehouse," she said softly. "The dump you laughed about." "It was full of rats," Jessica blurted out. "It was," Alice agreed, "but it was also sitting on top of a subterranean server infrastructure from the Cold War era. Old fiber optic lines that the city forgot about. Dark fiber. Do you know what that's worth to a data company, Marcus? I didn't sell the warehouse. I mortgaged it. I used the dark fiber as collateral to secure a loan. And then I hired the people you fired." She gestured to Leo. "You fired Leo because he told you the Nexus chip had a heating issue. I hired him to fix it. And he did. Marcus sank into the chair. He felt dizzy. So, Aurelius. Aurelius was the Roman emperor known as the philosopher king, Alice said. He wrote meditations. He wrote about resilience, about enduring pain with dignity. I thought it was a fitting name. She tapped the table. Now let's talk business. You're here because Sterling Tech is bleeding. Your Nexus chip is melting servers. You lost the Pentagon contract to me. Your stock is in free fall. You came here to buy me. She finally smiled, but it was terrifying. I'm afraid, Marcus, that you can't afford me. My valuation as of this morning is 4 times yours. We can work something out, Marcus said, his voice desperate. He switched into survival mode. We can partner, a merger of equals. Imagine the press, the reunion of the power couple. Alice, think about it. We were good together once. He reached across the table, trying to touch her hand. I made a mistake. I see that now. We can fix this. Alice looked at his hand, then up at his eyes. A merger of equals, she asked. But Marcus, we aren't equals. You're a failing CEO with a product that catches fire. I'm the industry leader. She signaled to the lawyers. One of them slid a document across the black marble toward Marcus. I'm not interested in a partnership, Alice said, her voice freezing the entire room. This is an acquisition offer. I am buying Sterling Tech. I'm buying your patents, your client list, and your infrastructure. Marcus looked down at the paper. His eyes widened. This offer, it's insulting, he choked out. This is pennies on the dollar. It's the market value of a sinking ship, Alice said casually. Plus there's a special clause in there regarding the CEO. What clause? You're fired, Alice said. Effective immediately upon signature. You will be stripped of your board seat. You will have no voting rights, and in exchange I will prevent your company from going bankrupt and your legacy from being the man who burned down the tech industry. I won't sign it, Marcus spat, standing up. I'll fight you. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you stole my ideas. Alice's expression hardened. She reached into her folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. You could do that, she said, but then I would have to release this. She slid the paper to him. Marcus looked at it. It was a log of internal emails. His emails, from 3 years ago. What is this one? Proof, Alice said. Proof that you knew the Nexus chip was dangerous and authorized its release anyway to boost the stock price before you cashed out your options. That's not just incompetence, Marcus. That's fraud. That's prison time. Marcus went pale. He looked at Jessica, who was backing away from him, realizing the gravity of the situation. How did you get this? Marcus whispered. I told you, Alice said, leaning back in her chair, the picture of absolute victory. I hired the people you discarded. People talk, Marcus, especially when they've been mistreated. She pointed to the acquisition contract. Sign the papers, Marcus. You're lucky I'm letting you keep your freedom because you certainly aren't keeping your company. Marcus looked at the pen. It was the same brand of pen he had forced her to use 2 years ago. The irony was suffocating. And Marcus, Alice added, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. He looked up, broken. Make sure you leave the coffee maker. I always liked that machine. The pen scratched across the paper, a sound that felt louder to Marcus than a gunshot. With that signature, Sterling Tech, his life's work, his identity, his empire was gone. He stood up, his legs shaking. He expected Alice to say something cruel to gloat, but she didn't. She simply took the folder, handed it to the lawyer, and turned her chair around to face the window, looking out at the city rain. She was already done with him. He was no longer a problem to be solved. He was a task that had been completed. "Get out," Leo said, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus stumbled out of the conference room, past the silent, judging eyes of the staff, and into the elevator. Jessica followed him furiously, typing on her phone. As the elevator descended, the silence between them was toxic. "We can fix this," Marcus muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I have offshore accounts. I have connections in Dubai. We can start over. I'm Marcus Sterling. I'm a brand." The elevator doors opened to the lobby. Jessica stepped out first, but she didn't head toward the waiting car. She turned toward the exit that led to the taxi stand. "Jessica," Marcus called out, confused. "The car is this way." Jessica stopped and turned around. She looked at him with a mix of pity and disgust. "The car is company property, Marcus," she said. "You don't own the company anymore, which means you don't have a car. I'll call an Uber Black. Who cares? Let's just go back to the penthouse." The penthouse is leased under Sterling Tech corporate housing. Jessica pointed out, her voice cold. "They'll evict you by the morning. And as for we," she let out a dry laugh. "There is no we, Marcus. I signed up for the cover of Vogue and weekends in Monaco. I didn't sign up for prison visits and bankruptcy hearings." You ungrateful," Marcus stammered, his face turning red. You bought me," Jessica corrected him, sliding her sunglasses on, even though it was raining. "And now your credit has run out. Goodbye, Marcus." She walked out into the rain, hailing a cab, without looking back. Marcus stood alone in the lobby of his ex-wife's building. He felt a vibration in his pocket. He pulled out his phone. It was his personal banker. "Mr. Sterling," the banker said, sounding urgent. "I'm calling to inform you that the SEC has just frozen your personal assets, pending an investigation into insider trading and fraud. Your cards have been declined." Marcus dropped the phone. It clattered onto the polished concrete floor. He had walked into this building a king. He was walking out a pauper. He stumbled outside. The Maybach was gone. The security guards who had escorted him in were nowhere to be seen. The rain soaked his Italian suit instantly. He began to walk. He didn't know where he was going. He walked for hours until his shoes were ruined, and he was shivering uncontrollably. He found himself standing in front of the Sterling Tech Tower. His tower. He tried to enter, but his badge didn't work. The red light blinked mockingly. Access denied. A security guard, a man Marcus had walked past for 5 years without ever learning his name, stepped out. "I can't let you in, Mr. Sterling," the guard said, not unkindly. "New orders from the new ownership. You're barred from the premises." "It's my building," Marcus screamed, slamming his hands against the glass. "I built this. You work for me." "I work for Aurelius Solutions now, sir," the guard said. "Please leave, or I'll have to call the police." Marcus slid down the glass wall, sitting on the wet pavement. He looked up at the skyscraper he had erected to his own ego. The massive Sterling logo at the top was already dark. And then he saw it. A crew was already up there on a lift. They were dismantling the S. He watched as his name was taken down, letter by letter, leaving nothing behind but the grey sky. 3 days later, the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was packed to capacity. Every major news network, tech blog, and financial analyst was present. The air buzzed with anticipation. The rumor mill had been working overtime. Sterling Tech had been acquired by the mysterious Aurelius Solutions. But the real story wasn't the money. It was the identity of EV. The stage was set with a simple podium. No flashy graphics, no hype music. Just a clean white backdrop with the Aurelius logo, a golden spear. Marcus sat in his small rented studio apartment on the edge of town, staring at the television. He was unshaven, wearing a stained t-shirt. He had a bottle of cheap whiskey in his hand. He shouldn't be watching. He should be meeting with his criminal defense lawyer. But he couldn't look away. On the screen, the lights dimmed. Leo Hertz walked onto the stage. He looked sharp, vindicated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Leo said into the microphone, "for years the tech industry has been dominated by noise, by ego, by promises that couldn't be kept. We at Aurelius believe in something different. We believe in substance." He paused. "Today we announce the acquisition of Sterling Tech. We are discarding the bad code, the bad hardware, and the toxic culture. We are rebuilding." A murmur went through the crowd. "But you all want to know who made this happen," Leo continued. "You want to know the architect, the founder." He stepped aside. "Please welcome the CEO of Aurelius Solutions, Mrs. Alice Vance." The curtain rose. Alice walked out. She looked radiant. She wore a white power suit that made her glow under the stage lights. She didn't look like a scorned woman. She looked like a visionary. The crowd gasped. They recognized her. She was the woman who used to stand silently behind Marcus in photos holding his coat while he signed autographs. The trophy wife who had been discarded. Marcus gripped the whiskey bottle so hard his knuckles turned white. Alice stepped to the podium. She waited for the applause to die down. She looked directly into the camera, and Marcus felt like she was looking right into his soul. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady and warm. "2 years ago, I was told that I had no value. I was told that my contribution to this industry was 0. I was told that without a certain man's name, I was nothing." She smiled a small, knowing smile. "I stand here today to prove that value is not determined by who you are married to. It is determined by what you can build when you are finally free to think for yourself." A reporter from the front row shouted a question. "Mrs. Vance, what happens to the Sterling legacy? What happens to Marcus Sterling?" Alice's face became serious. "The Sterling legacy was built on a foundation of lies," she said clearly. "We have released full documentation to the SEC and the Department of Justice regarding the fraudulent data used to sell the Nexus chip. We are issuing a full recall. We are refunding every customer." The crowd erupted. This was unprecedented. She was admitting fault to save the company's integrity. "As for Marcus Sterling," Alice continued, her voice turning icy, "he is no longer associated with this company. History will remember him as a lesson in hubris." She leaned into the mic. "And to anyone out there who feels marginalized, silenced, or underestimated, remember this. The people who tell you that you are nothing are usually the ones who are terrified of what you might become." She stepped back. The applause was deafening. It was a standing ovation. On the screen, the camera panned to the crowd. Marcus saw old friends of his clapping. He saw investors who used to wine and dine him, cheering for his destruction. He threw the whiskey bottle at the TV. It smashed the screen, sparking and dying. The room went dark. Marcus sat in the silence, breathing heavily. It was over. The narrative was set. He was the villain. She was the hero. But then a knock came at his door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding. "Marcus Sterling," a voice boomed. "Federal agents, open the door." Marcus closed his eyes. He didn't move. He thought about the warehouse. He thought about the $1 settlement. He thought about the moment he laughed in her face. "Open up!" The door splintered as it was kicked in. Men in windbreakers with FBI printed on the back swarmed the small room. As they cuffed his hands behind his back and dragged him out, Marcus didn't fight. He was too exhausted. But as he was shoved into the back of the squad car, he looked up at a digital billboard down the street. It was a live feed of the Times Square NASDAQ board. Aurelius Solutions RLS, plus 45%, CEO. Alice Vance declared new face of tech. He lowered his head. She hadn't just taken his company. She had taken his world, and she had done it without raising her voice. The alarm clock on the floor buzzed a harsh mechanical rattle that vibrated against the cheap laminate wood. It was 4:30 p.m., but the light filtering through the single grime-streaked window was already grey and dying. Marcus Sterling groaned, rolling off the thin mattress that took up most of the floor space in his studio apartment. He didn't have a bed frame anymore. The estate liquidators had taken the California King from the penthouse, along with the silk sheets, the mahogany dresser, and the art that used to hang on the walls. He sat on the edge of the mattress, rubbing a hand over his face. Stubble scratched against his palm. He used to get a hot towel shave at a barber shop in the financial district every morning for $80. Now he shaved with disposable razors that left his skin raw and weeping with tiny cuts. 12 months. It had been exactly 12 months since the FBI kicked down his door. In that year, Marcus had learned exactly how quickly the world forgets a visionary. The fall hadn't been a sudden drop. It was a slow, agonizing slide. First came the freezing of the assets. Then the lawyer's sharks who smelled blood draining what little cash he could access until he was forced to apply for a public defender. He had avoided prison only by turning state's witness, ratting out 3 board members and his own CFO. It kept him out of a cell, but it sealed his fate in the city. He wasn't just a failure. He was a snitch. His phone sat on the floor. No messages, no missed calls. The contacts list, once filled with senators, venture capitalists, and celebrities, was now a graveyard of blocked numbers. He stood up and walked to the small bathroom. The mirror was cracked. He looked at his reflection. The eyes that used to stare out from the cover of Forbes with predatory confidence were now sunken and rimmed with red. He looked older than 35. He looked defeated. "Get it together," he whispered, his voice raspy. "It's a gig. Just a gig." He splashed cold water on his face and reached for the uniform hanging on the shower rod. A burgundy polyester vest, black slacks that were too short at the ankles, and a clip-on bow tie. Prestige Valet Services. It was the only company that didn't do a background check on his financial crimes. He dressed in sonce, the cheap fabric itching his skin. He had to be uptown by 5:30. Tonight was a big event. The manager had said the tips would be good. Marcus needed the tips. Rent was due in 3 days, and he was short by $200. He walked out of his apartment building, a crumbling tenement, in the shadow of the highway overpass, and headed toward the subway. As he walked, he passed a bus stop. A digital advertisement illuminated the sidewalk. It was a sleek, minimalist poster featuring a woman in a white suit looking toward a horizon of digital code. Aurelius Solutions. Building Tomorrow, Today. Featured keynote. Alice Vance. Marcus stopped. He couldn't help it. He stared at her face. She looked powerful, untouchable. The photo had clearly been retouched, but the strength in her eyes was real. He remembered those eyes looking at him across the breakfast table, pleading for 5 minutes of his attention while he scrolled through Twitter. He felt a physical pain in his chest, a mixture of regret and toxic jealousy. He spat on the ground near the poster and kept walking. The event was being held at the Grand Vieux Hotel, the most opulent venue in the city. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He and Alice had held their wedding reception here 7 years ago. He remembered the taste of the cake, the smell of the lilies, the way he had toasted to his own future success, while she smiled shyly beside him. Now he was standing on the curb, shivering in the biting October wind, waiting for rich people to throw their keys at him. Sterling. You're on the VIP line. The shift supervisor, a man named Gary who enjoyed his small amount of power a little too much, shouted over the wind. Don't scratch anything, or it's coming out of your check. I know how to drive, Gary, Marcus muttered. What was that? I said I got it. The cars began to arrive. It was a parade of excess. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, custom G-Wagons. Marcus fell into a rhythmic trance. Open door. Good evening, sir. Hand over ticket. Take keys. Drive to lot. Run back. Repeat. His feet ached. The dress shoes he had bought at a thrift store offered zero support. Every step sent a jolt of pain up his shins. Around 7:00 p.m., the flow of cars slowed down. The main guests had arrived. Marcus leaned against a concrete pillar, catching his breath. He watched the entrance of the hotel. The red carpet was bathed in golden light. He could hear the faint sound of a string quartet playing inside. Heard the hostess is a real piece of work, another valet, a kid named Kevin, said, lighting a cigarette. Marcus stiffened. Who? The lady running the charity. Vance, some tech billionaire. They say she bought her ex-husband's company just to fire him. Kevin laughed, blowing smoke into the cold air. That's ice cold, man. Respect. Marcus gripped his own arms, trying to stop the shivering. Yeah. Respect. Yo, heads up. We got a late arrival. Looks expensive. Marcus looked up. Turning the corner was a vehicle that silenced the street. It was the Aurelius Phantom. It was a prototype electric sedan, matte black with gold trim. It moved silently like a predator stalking prey. It was the car Marcus had tried to build for 5 years. He had failed. Alice had succeeded. The car glided to a halt right in front of Marcus. Take it, Sterling, Gary barked. VIP handling. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He wanted to run. He wanted to throw up. He couldn't do this. He couldn't open that door. But he had no choice. If he walked away, he lost the job. If he lost the job, he lost the apartment. He forced his legs to move. He walked to the driver's side. The window was tinted so dark he couldn't see inside. He reached for the handle, his hand trembling. The door opened before he could touch it. Leo Hertz stepped out. Marcus flinched. He knew Leo. He had hired Leo fresh out of Stanford. He had fired Leo for disagreeing with him in a meeting. Now Leo was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Marcus's entire net worth before the crash. Leo looked right at him. Marcus held his breath. He waited for the recognition. He waited for Leo to say, Marcus, is that you? He prepared a lie. I'm doing research for a book. I'm undercover. But Leo just looked through him. He didn't see Marcus Sterling, the former CEO. He saw a man in a cheap burgundy vest. He saw a servant. Keep it near the front, Leo said, tossing the key fob. It was heavy, made of solid platinum. We might leave early. Yes, sir, Marcus whispered, catching the keys. Leo turned back to the car and extended a hand to the passenger. "Ready, Alice?" Marcus froze. The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. A leg stepped out. A silver stiletto heel hit the pavement. Then the rest of her followed. Alice Vance stood up, smoothing the fabric of her dress. It was a deep, shimmering emerald green, the color of money, the color of envy. She wore diamonds around her neck that caught the streetlights and fractured them into 1,000 stars. Her hair, once kept long and simple, was styled in a sharp, modern wave. She was radiant. She wasn't just beautiful. She was imposing. She carried an aura of absolute authority. Marcus stood 3 feet away from her. He could smell her perfume, jasmine and sandalwood. It was the same perfume she wore when they were married. The scent hit him with the force of a physical blow, dragging up a tidal wave of memories. Sunday mornings, Christmas Eves, the day she told him she was proud of him. He was paralyzed. He stood there, clutching the platinum key fob, staring at the woman he had thrown away. Alice took Leo's arm. She adjusted her clutch purse. Then she paused. She turned her head. Slowly, deliberately, her eyes swept over the street, over the red carpet, and landed on the valet. Time stopped. The noise of the city, the honking taxis, the wind, the chatter of the paparazzi faded into a dull hum. Marcus couldn't breathe. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. She sees me, he thought. This is it. The final humiliation. She's going to say my name. She's going to laugh. He saw her green eyes widen slightly. A flicker of recognition. A spark of shock. For a fleeting second, Marcus saw the old Alice. The woman who had loved him. He felt a desperate, pathetic hope rise in his chest. Maybe she would show mercy. Maybe she would say hello. Maybe she would acknowledge that he existed. But then the flicker vanished. Her eyes went flat. The warmth didn't leave her face. It just never arrived. She looked at him with a profound, crushing indifference. It was the way one looks at a parking meter or a lamppost. An object, a function. She didn't see an ex-husband. She didn't see a rival. She saw an employee. She let go of Leo's arm and took a step toward him. Marcus wanted to back away, but his feet were lead. Alice reached into her small, crystal-encrusted clutch, her manicured fingers adorned with a massive solitaire diamond ring that she had bought for herself, pulled out a bill. She held it out to him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was smooth, melodic, and utterly impersonal. Marcus stared at her hand. He stared at the bill. He reached out his hand, shaking violently. His dirty, rough fingers brushed against her soft, perfect skin. The contact sent a shock wave through him. He took the bill. "Have a wonderful evening," Alice said, turning away before he could even utter a sound. "Shall we, Leo?" she asked, her voice brightening as she turned her back on him. "I don't want to miss the opening speech." "After you, Madam Chairwoman," Leo said, offering his arm. They walked away arm in arm up the red carpet. The paparazzi cameras flashed in a frenzy, shouting her name. "Alice, Alice, over here! Look at the camera!" She was the center of the universe. Marcus was left alone in the dark. He looked down at his hand. He slowly unfolded the crumpled bill she had pressed into his palm. It was $1. $1. The air left his lungs. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a random bill she grabbed. It was deliberate. It was precise. It was the settlement. "Sign the papers, Alice. You get a lump sum of $1. The memory of his own voice echoed in his head, mocking him. He had placed that value on her. He had defined her worth as $1, and now she was returning the investment. She hadn't given him the dollar to help him. She hadn't given it to be cruel. She had given it to him because that was what he was worth to her now. A transaction, a symbolic gesture closing the ledger forever. He squeezed the bill in his fist until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run up the red carpet and throw it at her. He wanted to tell the world who he was. But he didn't, because nobody cared. "Hey, buddy." A horn honked aggressively behind him. A yellow taxi was trying to get past the idling Aurelius Phantom. "Move the damn car," the taxi driver yelled. Marcus flinched. He looked at the luxury car. He looked at the hotel entrance where Alice had disappeared. He shoved the $1 bill into his pocket. It sat there burning against his thigh, a permanent reminder of the price of arrogance. "I'm moving it," Marcus whispered. "I'm moving it." He opened the door of the car he would never own, slid into the seat of the life he had lost, and drove into the shadows of the parking garage, disappearing into the darkness where he now belonged. And that is the story of how Alice turned her greatest heartbreak into her greatest victory. Marcus thought he could strip her of her worth with $1, but he forgot that true value comes from within, and that sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones holding all the cards. What did you think of Alice's revenge? Was the $1 tip at the end the perfect payback? Or did Marcus deserve even worse? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and twists, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on the next drama. We have a crazy story coming next week involving a billionaire heir and a secret identity you won't believe. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.
Gabriel stood on the balcony of the $10 million penthouse, champagne in one hand and his mistress's waist in the other, laughing as he watched his wife's taxi drive away in the rain. He thought he had won. He thought he was the brilliant CEO who had outsmarted a boring, silent housewife. He had just served her divorce papers and kicked her out of the life he believed he built. But Gabriel made a fatal calculation. He didn't read the fine print of the assets he flaunted. He didn't know that the penthouse, the cars, and even the clothes on his back didn't belong to him. They belonged to the woman he just discarded, and she was about to turn the lights off. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Pacific Rim Hotel smelled of expensive perfume-aged scotch and the distinct metallic scent of unchecked arrogance. It was the annual gala for Ventura Holdings, a company that had seen a meteoric rise in the tech sector over the last 5 years. At the center of the room, holding court like a king on his coronation day, was Gabriel Scott. Gabriel was 42, handsome in a way that required constant maintenance, with teeth veneered to a blinding white, and a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than most people's cars. He laughed loudly at a joke made by a potential investor, his hand resting possessively on the shoulder of a woman who was definitely not his wife. The woman was Tiffany. She was 24, a brand consultant with chemically straightened blonde hair and a dress that was less of a garment and more of a suggestion. She hung on Gabriel's every word, her eyes darting around the room to ensure everyone saw her proximity to power. Standing in the shadows near a potted ficus gripping a glass of sparkling water was Lorelei. Lorelei Scott was the ghost at the feast. She wore a navy dress that was elegant but understated, high-necked and long-sleeved, contrasting sharply with the sea of glittering sequins around her. She had been married to Gabriel for 15 years. In those 15 years, she had watched him transform from a nervous, ambitious junior analyst into this strutting peacock of a CEO. "Your husband is certainly in high spirits tonight," a voice said beside her. Lorelei turned to see Mr. Prescott, the family attorney. He was an older man, sharp as a razor, with eyes that missed nothing. He had known Lorelei since she was a child. "He just closed the deal with the Japanese investors, Arthur," Lorelei said softly, her voice calm. "He feels he deserves a victory lap." "And that—" Prescott nodded discreetly toward Tiffany, who was now feeding Gabriel a canapé while he giggled. "Is that part of the victory lap?" Lorelei's expression didn't change, though her grip on the glass tightened slightly. "Gabriel goes through phases, Arthur. You know that. He likes shiny things." "He's humiliating you, Lorelei," Prescott said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "The board members are watching. The partners are watching. He's treating the woman who made him as if she's invisible." "Let him have his night," Lorelei said, taking a sip of water. "Hubris usually corrects itself." But this wasn't just a phase. Lorelei knew it. For months Gabriel had been distant. The late nights at the office had turned into weekend trips to conferences in Aspen and Miami. Credit card statements, which Lorelei never checked because Gabriel insisted on handling the finances to protect her pretty little head from stress, were likely filled with jewelry stores and five-star hotels she had never visited. Gabriel finally detached himself from Tiffany and sauntered over to Lorelei. He smelled of bourbon and Tiffany's cloying vanilla perfume. "Lorelei," he said, his tone bordering on annoyance, "why are you hiding in the corner? You look like a governess. Go mingle, or at least try to smile. You're bringing the room down." "I was just speaking with Arthur," Lorelei said quietly. Gabriel sneered at the lawyer. "Prescott, still hanging around like a bad smell? I told you I'm moving Ventura's legal counsel to a more modern firm next quarter. We need sharks, not dinosaurs." Prescott smiled a thin, dangerous expression. "I serve at the pleasure of the trust, Gabriel, not the CEO." Gabriel waved a dismissive hand. "Same thing. I am the trust. I am this company. Now, Lorelei, fix your lipstick. It's faded. You look washed out." He turned back to the crowd, shouting, "Tiffany! Come here, darling. I want to introduce you to the senator." Lorelei watched him go. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried over Gabriel in 3 years. She simply observed, calculating the distance between the man she had married and the monster standing under the chandelier. The drive home was silent. Gabriel had insisted Tiffany take the company limo to ensure she got home safely, leaving Lorelei to drive Gabriel home in his Aston Martin. He passed out in the passenger seat 5 minutes into the ride, snoring with his mouth open. When they arrived at the estate Blackwood Manor, a sprawling modern masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking the ocean, Lorelei parked the car and looked at the house. It was a cold structure. It felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to Gabriel's ego. She woke him up. "Gabriel, we're home." He groaned, swatting her hand away. "God, you're annoying. Can't you let a man sleep?" He stumbled out of the car and into the house, leaving the front door wide open. Lorelei walked in after him, locking the heavy oak door. She found him in the kitchen, chugging water directly from a pitcher. "We need to talk," Gabriel said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He leaned against the marble island, his eyes bloodshot but suddenly focused. "It's 2:00 a.m., Gabriel," Lorelei said, placing her keys in the bowl. "I don't care what time it is. I'm tired of pretending, Lorelei. I'm tired of this." He gestured vaguely at her. "You, the silence, the boredom. I'm a man in his prime. I run a multi-million-dollar empire. I need someone who matches my energy, someone who shines." Lorelei stood very still. "You mean Tiffany?" Gabriel laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Yes, Tiffany. She's alive, Lorelei. She looks at me like I'm a god. You look at me like I'm a chore you have to complete. I look at you like a wife who has supported you when you were nothing." Lorelei corrected him. "I was never nothing." Gabriel slammed his hand on the counter. "I had the vision, I did the work. You just sat here in this house. I paid for wearing clothes I bought, living a life I provided. You're a leech, Lorelei. A boring, aging leech. He reached into his inner suit jacket pocket and pulled out a thick brown envelope. He tossed it onto the kitchen island. It slid across the marble and stopped inches from Lorelei's hand. "What is this?" she asked. "Freedom," Gabriel said. "For both of us, but mostly for me." Lorelei stared at the envelope. She didn't open it immediately. "Divorce papers." "Prepared by my new lawyers," Gabriel said, pouring himself a drink from the bar cart despite having just chugged water. "I'm being generous, Lorelei, more generous than you deserve. I'm offering you a lump sum settlement of $200,000. Lorelei looked up, her eyebrows raising slightly. $200,000, Gabriel. We have been married for 15 years. The assets are mine, Gabriel roared, his face flushing red. Who goes to the office every day? Me. Who closes the deals? Me. Who is the face of Ventura Holdings? Me. You plan charity dinners and arrange flowers. You have earned nothing. He took a step closer, looming over her. The house is in my name. The cars are in my name. The bank accounts are under the corporation. You have no claim to them. If you fight this, I will bury you in legal fees until you are begging on the street. Take the $200,000, sign the papers, and get out. Get out, Lorelei repeated. Tonight. Tiffany is moving in tomorrow morning. Gabriel said, a smug grin spreading across his face. She wants to redecorate the master bedroom. She says it smells like old people. I don't want you here when she arrives. It would be awkward. Lorelei looked at the man she had once loved. She remembered the day they met at a library. He had been wearing a frayed sweater, studying for his business exams, looking so earnest and humble. That man was dead. Gabriel, Lorelei said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Are you sure you want to do this? Once I walk out that door, there is no coming back. I want you to think very carefully about who owns what. Gabriel rolled his eyes. Don't try to threaten me, Lorelei. You're pathetic. I know who owns what. I'm the CEO. I'm the king. Now go upstairs, pack a bag, and call a cab. You can come back for your boxes of knitting or whatever useless junk you have later next week. But I want you gone tonight. Lorelei stood there for a long moment. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, broken only by the hum of the sub-zero refrigerator. Finally, she reached out and picked up the envelope. Okay, she said. Gabriel blinked, surprised by her lack of resistance. He had expected screaming, crying, begging. He had prepared speeches about how she wasn't good enough for him. Her calmness unnerved him, but he quickly chalked it up to her being defeated. Okay, he scoffed. Smart choice, finally using your brain. Lorelei walked out of the kitchen and up the grand staircase. She didn't go to the master bedroom. She went to the guest room down the hall, the one she had been sleeping in for the last 3 months since Gabriel's snoring and late-night phone calls had become unbearable. She packed a single leather overnight bag. She took her toiletries, 2 changes of clothes, and a small velvet-bound notebook from her nightstand. She left the jewelry Gabriel had bought her, the gaudy diamond necklaces, the oversized watches sitting on the dresser. She didn't want them. She walked back downstairs. Gabriel was now in the living room watching Bloomberg TV with his feet up on the coffee table, a cigar in his hand. He didn't even look at her. Leave the keys on the table, he called out without turning his head. And don't scratch the floor on your way out. Lorelei placed her house key and the key to the Aston Martin on the console table. She pulled out her phone and opened a rideshare app. Goodbye, Gabriel, she said. He waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, have a nice life. Lorelei walked out the front door into the pouring rain. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, a sound of finality. She stood under the portico waiting for her ride. 10 minutes later, a modest sedan pulled up. The driver, a young man named Kevin, looked at her sympathetically as she climbed into the back seat, wet and shivering. Rough night, ma'am? Kevin asked, glancing at the massive illuminated mansion behind her. You could say that, Lorelei replied, buckling her seatbelt. Where to? Lorelei looked back at the house one last time. She saw the silhouette of Gabriel in the window raising a glass to himself. "Take me to the Pierre Hotel," Lorelei said. "And Kevin." "Yes, ma'am. Can you let me use your phone charger? I need to make a call to my grandfather's lawyer. It seems my husband has forgotten who actually signs his paychecks." As the car pulled away, Lorelei didn't look back. She opened the velvet notebook. Inside wasn't a diary or knitting patterns. It was a ledger, a list of account numbers, trust deeds, and intellectual property registrations. At the top of the first page, written in elegant cursive, were the words, "The Oak Haven Trust." Gabriel thought he was the king of the castle. He was about to find out he was just the court jester living in the Queen's guest house. The next morning, the sun rose over the estate, casting a golden light on the wet driveway. A moving truck arrived at 9:00 a.m. sharp. It wasn't Lorelei coming to get her things. It was a delivery for Tiffany. Gabriel stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe, greeting his mistress as she stepped out of a convertible. She squealed, running into his arms. "Oh, baby, it's finally ours!" Tiffany shrieked, spinning around. "I can't believe she's actually gone. Was it hard to kick her out?" "Like taking out the trash?" Gabriel said, kissing her forehead. "Come on, let's go see the master bedroom. I want that drab wallpaper gone by noon." They walked inside, laughing, their voices echoing in the high ceilings. Gabriel felt invincible. He had the girl, the house, the money, and the freedom. He picked up his phone to check the company accounts, wanting to transfer some funds for Tiffany's redecorating spree. He opened the banking app, expecting to see the usual 7-figure balance in his personal operating account. Instead, a notification popped up on the screen in red text. "Access denied. User unauthorized." Gabriel frowned. "That's weird." He tried again. "Access denied. Contact account administrator." "Damn bank glitches," Gabriel muttered. He pulled out his black credit card, the Centurion card he used for everything. "Tiffany just used this for the movers. I need to call the bank and yell at someone." He handed the card to Tiffany. She ran over to the lead mover. A moment later, she came back looking confused. "Gabriel?" "The guy said the card was declined." "Don't be stupid," Gabriel snapped. "That card has no limit." "He tried it 3 times, Tiffany said, her voice losing some of its cheer. "It says card canceled, stolen." Gabriel felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his back. "Stolen? I'm holding it right here." He walked over to the landline phone in the hallway to call the concierge service. He picked up the receiver. There was no dial tone, just a recorded voice. "This service has been suspended at the request of the account holder, Oak Haven Trust. If you are a guest, please contact the property owner." Gabriel stared at the phone. Oak Haven Trust. He whispered the name. He had heard it before. It was the name on the bottom of the deed he had signed 15 years ago, the day after his wedding. He had never paid attention to it. He thought it was just a tax shell company his lawyer had set up. But his lawyer was Prescott. And Prescott had been talking to Lorelei last night. The color drained from Gabriel's face. He looked around the foyer, the marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the art on the walls. For the first time in 10 years, Gabriel Scott felt fear. Gabriel Scott stood in the foyer of Blackwood Manor, the phone receiver dangling from his hand like a dead snake. The automated message from the concierge service replayed in his mind. Account holder, Oak Haven Trust. "Gabriel," Tiffany called out from the living room, her voice edged with a whine that was already starting to grate on his nerves. "The movers are literally standing here waiting to be paid. They said they won't unload the leopard print sofa until the payment clears. It's embarrassing." Gabriel slammed the phone down. "I'll handle it," he snarled, smoothing his silk robe. He marched into his study, or what he thought was his study, and booted up his desktop computer. He needed to transfer money from his offshore account in the Caymans. That account was his safety net, his rainy day fund hidden from the main domestic finances. Surely Lorelei couldn't touch that. He logged into the secure portal. The screen loaded, the little circle spinning. Balance $1,000,000. Gabriel blinked. He rubbed his eyes and refreshed the page. Balance $1,000,000. Recent transactions. Wire transfer to LA Holdings. $4,500,000. Authorized by joint signatory. Joint signatory. Gabriel whispered, his voice trembling. He clicked on the account details. There in the original paperwork he had signed 5 years ago to set up the Shell Corporation was a clause he had completely ignored. The silent partner had full veto power and withdrawal rights. The signature at the bottom was a scrawl he recognized instantly, Lorelei Scott. She hadn't just taken the house money. She had drained his escape fund. Gabriel Tiffany appeared in the doorway, hands on her hips. "They're leaving. The movers are getting back in the truck." Gabriel ignored her. He ran past her up the stairs and into the master bedroom. He needed his watch collection. The Patek Philippe, the Rolex Daytonas. There was easily $500,000 in watches in the safe. He could pawn one, pay the movers, and figure out a lawyer later. He rushed to the wall safe hidden behind the painting of a ship in a storm, a painting he had commissioned for $20,000. He punched in the code 1980, his birth year. Beep, beep, beep. Error. He tried again. Error. He tried a third time. The safe entered lockdown mode. "No, no, no!" Gabriel pounded his fist against the wall. "She changed the code. She changed the damn code." Panic, cold and sharp, began to pierce through his hangover. He turned to the dresser. His car keys were there. The Aston Martin DB11. It was parked in the garage. If he could just get to the office, he could talk to Robert Cole, his CFO. Robert would fix this. Robert knew where the bodies were buried. Gabriel threw on the clothes he had worn the night before, a wrinkled dress shirt and suit trousers. He didn't bother with a tie. He grabbed the keys and sprinted past a confused Tiffany. "Where are you going?" she screamed. "You can't leave me here with empty rooms." "Shut up, Tiffany," Gabriel yelled over his shoulder. "I have to go to the office. Lorelei is trying to play games. I'm going to end it." He burst into the garage. The Aston Martin sat there sleek and silver, a beast of a machine. He jumped in, threw the key fob into the cup holder, and pressed the start button. The dashboard lit up. The engine roared to life. Gabriel exhaled a ragged breath of relief. Okay, just a glitch. Just a scare. He put the car in reverse and backed out of the garage. But as soon as the car crossed the threshold of the driveway, the engine sputtered. The dashboard screens turned red. Anti-theft system activated. Vehicle immobilized. GPS tracking alert sent to owner. The engine died. The steering wheel locked. The doors clicked, locking him inside. "What?" Gabriel pulled the handle. Locked. He pounded on the window. "Open, open, you piece of junk." His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. It was a text message from a number he didn't have saved, but he knew who it was. Message: "Please leave the vehicle keys on the seat. The police have been notified of an unauthorized user attempting to steal company property. Arthur Prescott SQ." Gabriel screamed a primal sound of rage and kicked the dashboard, scuffing the expensive leather. He was trapped in his own driveway in a car he couldn't drive outside a house he apparently didn't own. He had to break the window. He used his elbow, slamming it against the glass until it finally shattered. He climbed out, cutting his hand on a shard of glass. Bleeding wet from the rain that was starting to fall again, and manic, he ran down the long driveway to the main road. He flagged down a passing taxi, looking like a madman. "Take me to the Ventura Tower," Gabriel barked at the driver as he threw himself into the back seat. "Drive fast. I'll give you $100. He patted his pockets. He had no cash. His credit cards were dead. "Actually," Gabriel said, his voice cracking, "do you take Venmo?" The Ventura Tower was a 40-story monument to modern capitalism in the heart of the financial district. Gabriel had personally designed the lobby floor-to-ceiling marble, a waterfall feature, and a massive gold logo of a V behind the reception desk. Usually when Gabriel walked in, the security guard stood straighter. The receptionist smiled nervously. Junior analysts scrambled to hold the elevator doors. Today Gabriel burst through the revolving doors, his shirt soaked with rain, his hand wrapped in a bloody handkerchief and his hair plastered to his forehead. "Mr. Scott." The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, looked at him with wide eyes. "Get Robert Cole on the line." Gabriel barked, marching toward the private executive elevators. "And tell security to clear the conference room. I'm calling an emergency board meeting." He reached the turnstiles and slapped his platinum security badge against the reader. Beep, beep. Red light. Gabriel tried again. Beep, beep. "Sarah!" Gabriel shouted, turning back to the desk. "My badge is demagnetized. Buzz me in." Sarah bit her lip, looking down at her computer screen. She didn't press the button. She picked up her phone and whispered something. Two large men in dark suits emerged from the security office. They weren't the usual building security guards Gabriel knew by name. These were private contractors, massive, stone-faced, and blocking his path. "Mr. Scott," the one on the left said. His voice was gravel. "We have been instructed to escort you to the boardroom. However, you are not permitted to enter any other areas of the building." "Escort me?" Gabriel laughed incredulously. "I own this building. I built this tower. Get out of my way." "Please come with us, sir," the guard said, stepping forward. It wasn't a request. Gabriel straightened his jacket, trying to salvage some dignity. "Fine. Take me to the boardroom. I'm going to fire every single person in this lobby by lunch." They escorted him up to the 40th floor. The elevator ride was silent and suffocating. When the doors opened, Gabriel stormed down the hallway toward the double glass doors of the main conference room. He threw the doors open. "Robert," he yelled. "What the hell is going on with the accounts? I want answers." He stopped dead. The long mahogany table was full. The entire board of directors was there. 6 men and women in expensive suits, looking somber. At the far end of the table, in the seat usually reserved for the chairman, sat Arthur Prescott, the lawyer. And at the head of the table, in Gabriel's chair, the custom ergonomic leather chair he had imported from Germany, sat Lorelei. She was dry, impeccable, wearing a sharp white blazer that made her look like a blade. Her hands were folded on top of a thick stack of files. She looked at Gabriel with an expression he had never seen before. It wasn't love. It wasn't hate. It was total professional indifference. "You're late, Gabriel," Lorelei said. Her voice was calm, projecting effortlessly across the room. "What is this?" Gabriel demanded, walking toward the table. "Lorelei, get out of my chair. You're embarrassing yourself. This is a place of business, not a tea party." "Sit down, Mr. Scott," Arthur Prescott said, gesturing to a small, flimsy folding chair set up at the opposite end of the table, far away from the power players. "I will not sit in a folding chair in my own company," Gabriel roared. He looked at Robert Cole, his CFO. "Robert, tell her to leave. Tell her who runs this place." Robert Cole, a man with a nervous tic who usually laughed at all of Gabriel's jokes, didn't look up. He was staring intensely at his iPad. I can't do that, Gabriel." "Why not?" "Because Lorelei interjected. "Robert works for the majority shareholder, and as of 8:00 a.m. this morning, the shareholders have voted unanimously to remove you as CEO of Ventura Holdings due to gross misconduct and misappropriation of company funds." Gabriel froze. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Majority shareholder I am. The majority shareholder, I own 51% of the stock." Lorelei sighed, as if explaining algebra to a slow child. She opened the file in front of her. "No, Gabriel, you don't. You own 51% of the voting rights via a proxy agreement, but the actual stock, the equity, that is owned by the Oakhaven Trust." "And who," Gabriel sneered, though his voice wavered, "is Oakhaven Trust?" "Oakhaven is the holding company for the estate of Jonathan Sterling," Lorelei said. The name hit the room like a bomb. Jonathan Sterling was a legend in the industry, an old money industrialist who had died 20 years ago. "Your grandfather," Gabriel whispered. "My grandfather," Lorelei confirmed. When we married Gabriel, you were charming, ambitious. But my grandfather was a suspicious man. He set up the trust so that any business created with his inheritance money would remain the property of the trust. I let you play CEO. I let you put your name on the door. I let you take the magazine covers. But every dime of seed capital came from me. Every loan was secured by my assets. The intellectual property, the code for the Ventura algorithm. You didn't write it, Gabriel. You hired a team to write it using my money. Gabriel felt the room spinning. But the prenup. We signed a prenup. What's mine is mine. Arthur Prescott smiled. Correct. The prenup states that what you brought into the marriage is yours, and what Lorelei brought is hers. You brought... Let me check. He adjusted his glasses. A 2004 Honda Civic and $40,000 in student loan debt. You are welcome to keep those debts, Mr. Scott. This is a trick, Gabriel stammered. I built this company, I made the deals. The Japanese investors, they signed with me. Actually, Robert Cole finally spoke up. Mr. Sato called this morning. He was very displeased to hear about your public affair with that consultant. He values family honor highly. When Lorelei called him and explained the situation, he agreed to keep the contract provided. Ventura underwent a change in leadership. Gabriel looked around the table. The faces of the board members were cold. These were people he had dined with, played golf with, bought drinks for. You can't do this, Gabriel whispered. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Arthur Prescott said dryly. But we are not the police. We are just the landlords, and you are trespassing. Lorelei stood up. The room went silent. She walked slowly down the length of the table until she stood in front of Gabriel. He smelled of rain and fear. She smelled of expensive soap and victory. Gabriel, she said softly, I tried. For 15 years I tried to be the wife you wanted. I stayed in the background. I let you shine. I ignored the lipstick on your collars. I ignored the late nights. But when you brought that woman into my house, the house my grandfather built stone by stone, and tried to throw me out like garbage, you broke the only rule that mattered. Lorelei, please, Gabriel said, his voice cracking. He realized with terrifying clarity that he had absolutely nothing. We can talk about this. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. Tiffany, she means nothing to me. It was a midlife crisis. I'll fire her. We can go to counseling. Lorelei looked at him with pity. It's too late for counseling, Gabriel. The forensic accountants are already in your office. They found the transfers to the offshore accounts. That's embezzlement. You were stealing from the trust. I was just moving funds. You were stealing, Lorelei repeated. Now here is the offer. The board has prepared a separation agreement. She slid a single sheet of paper toward him. Sign this. You resign effectively immediately. You relinquish all claims to Ventura Holdings. You agree to a non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, the trust will not press criminal charges for the embezzlement. We will give you a severance package of $5,000 to help you get settled. $5,000? Gabriel choked. My suit costs $5,000? Then you should sell the suit, Lorelei said coldly. If you don't sign, Arthur calls the district attorney. The evidence is already compiled. You'll go to prison for 10 to 15 years. Gabriel looked at the paper. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold the pen Arthur offered him. He looked at the window at the rain falling on the city he thought he owned. He realized he was just a tenant who had forgotten to pay rent. He took the pen. He signed his name, Gabriel Scott. It looked like the signature of a child. Get him out of here, Lorelei said, turning her back on him and returning to the head of the table. The security guards grabbed Gabriel by the arms. Lorelei, he shouted as they dragged him toward the door. Lorelei, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, she said without looking back. The security guards didn't just escort Gabriel to the lobby, they threw him out onto the sidewalk. He stumbled, landing on his hands and knees on the wet concrete. Passers-by, people who might have been his employees or competitors, stepped around him, ignoring the man in the dirty wetsuit. Gabriel stood up, checking his phone. 14% battery. He had one person left. Tiffany. She was shallow, yes. She was annoying, yes. But she was there. And she had jewelry he had bought her. Expensive jewelry. If he could get to her, they could pawn the diamond necklace he gave her last week. It was worth $40,000. That was enough to hire a real shark of a lawyer and fight this. He didn't have money for a cab, so he started walking. It was a 5-mile walk back to the suburbs where Blackwood Manor stood, but he couldn't go there. He knew the locks would be changed. Instead, he remembered Tiffany had a small apartment in the city, a place she kept for her independence, which Gabriel paid the rent for. He walked for an hour in the rain, his Italian leather shoes squelching, blistering his feet. He arrived at her building, a trendy high-rise in the Arts District. He buzzed her intercom. "Who is it?" Her voice sounded strained. "It's me, Gabriel. Let me in." There was a long pause. "Gabriel, the doorman said the police were looking for you." "What? No, that's Lorelei's lies. Just let me in, Tiff. We need to talk. We need to sell the necklace." "The necklace?" "Yes, I need cash. I'm going to sue them, but I need a retainer. Let me up." "Gabriel," Tiffany said, her voice turning cold. "I looked up the news. Ventura Holdings issued a press release. It says you were fired for fraud. It says you're broke." "I'm not broke. It's a temporary liquidity issue. I'm still Gabriel Scott." "You're a liability, Gabriel," Tiffany said. "And by the way, I took the necklace to the pawn shop an hour ago." Gabriel felt a glimmer of hope. Good girl. How much did you get?" "I got 20 grand, she said. "And I used it to book a first-class ticket to Dubai. My friends are going there for the season. I can't be associated with a scandal, Gabriel. It's bad for my brand." You're leaving me," Gabriel screamed at the little metal speaker box. "After everything I gave you?" "You gave me stolen money, apparently," Tiffany snapped. "Don't come up here. I told security if you show up, they should call the cops. Goodbye, Gabriel." The intercom clicked off. Gabriel stood in the rain, staring at the steel box. He punched it, breaking the skin on his knuckles. He slid down the brick wall, sitting on the sidewalk, head in his hands. He was 42 years old. He had no job, no home, no car, no wife, no mistress, no money. The reality of his situation began to settle in like a heavy fog. He needed shelter. He needed food. He reached into his pocket and found the only thing he had left, his phone. 8% battery. He scrolled through his contacts. The senator, the VP of marketing, the golf club president. He called the senator. "Hello. Jim, it's Gabriel. Gabriel Scott." "Oh, Gabriel." The senator's voice dropped an octave. "I heard the news. Tough break." "It's a setup, Jim. Lorelei went crazy. I need a favor. Can I crash at your guest house for a few days, just until I get my legal team sorted?" Geez, Gabriel. I really can't. It's election season. I can't have a person of interest staying at the residence. It wouldn't look good for the campaign." "Person of interest, I'm your friend. We played golf twice, Gabriel. Look, I have to go. Good luck." Click. Gabriel called the VP of marketing. Voicemail. He called his best friend from college, a guy he had bailed out of jail twice. "Gabriel, dude, don't call me. The SEC is investigating Ventura. If I talk to you, they might audit me. Sorry." Click. Every door that had been opened to him yesterday was slammed shut today. He wasn't Gabriel Scott, the visionary CEO. He was radioactive waste. As night fell, Gabriel found himself walking toward a part of the city he had only ever seen from the window of his limousine. The streets were darker here. The smell of garbage was stronger. He saw a diner with a flickering neon sign, Joe's All Night Eats. He was starving. He hadn't eaten since the gala canapes. He walked in. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, looked him up and down. His suit was ruin-stained with mud and rain. He looked like a fallen banker, which is exactly what he was. "Coffee?" she asked, not unkindly. "Please," Gabriel rasped. "And, do you have any day-old donuts or something cheap?" She poured him a mug of black coffee. "Honey, you look like you've been through the ringer. On the house." Gabriel wrapped his hands around the warm mug. Tears, hot and humiliating, pricked his eyes. A free cup of coffee from a stranger was the most kindness he had received all day. The TV in the corner of the diner was tuned to the local news. Gabriel looked up and froze. His face was on the screen, a file photo from better days, smiling and confident. Breaking news: tech mogul Gabriel Scott ousted in shocking boardroom coup. Allegations of embezzlement and fraud rock Ventura Holdings. Stocks soar 15% on news of new leadership under Lorelei Scott. Stocks soared. The market liked that he was gone. Lorelei was giving a statement to the press outside the Ventura Tower. Gabriel watched, mesmerized. She looked regal. The previous management lost its way. Lorelei told the reporters, her voice steady. "We are returning to our core values: integrity, transparency, and stability. Ventura Holdings is under new management and we are stronger than ever." "What about your husband?" a reporter shouted. "Where is he?" Lorelei looked directly into the camera. For a second, Gabriel felt like she was looking right at him in the diner. "Mr. Scott is no longer associated with the family or the firm," she said. "I wish him well in his future endeavors." She turned and walked back into the building, her building. Gabriel put his head on the Formica table and wept. 6 months passed. The winter in the city was brutal. Gabriel learned quickly that a silk suit offers no protection against the wind when you're sleeping in a shelter. He had tried to get jobs. He applied for executive positions first, which was laughable, then middle management, then sales. But a quick Google search of his name brought up the articles: fraud, embezzlement, disgraced. No one would hire him. He was blacklisted in the corporate world. He eventually found work at a construction site, not as a foreman, but as a day laborer. He carried bricks. He mixed cement. His soft manicured hands blistered and calloused. His back, used to ergonomic chairs, ached constantly. He rented a room in a basement apartment shared with 3 other men. It smelled of mold and stale beer. It was a far cry from the penthouse, but it was dry. One afternoon his foreman shouted at him, "Scott, you're on cleanup duty. Go sweep the sidewalk in front of the site. We have VIPs coming to inspect the progress." Gabriel grabbed a broom and went out to the street. He swept the dust and debris head down, trying to make himself invisible. He wore a neon vest and a hard hat, his face hidden by a layer of grime. A line of luxury black SUVs pulled up to the curb. The VIPs. Gabriel kept sweeping, moving away from them. He didn't want to be recognized. He heard car doors open. He heard the click of high heels on the pavement. "The architectural plans for the new wing are ambitious," a familiar voice said. "But I think the community center needs to be larger. We want to give back to the neighborhood." Gabriel froze. He knew that voice. He turned his head slightly. Lorelei was standing there, surrounded by architects and city officials. She looked radiant. She wore a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Gabriel's entire year of wages at this new job. She wasn't just surviving. She was flourishing. She looked younger, lighter, free of the burden he had been. Beside her stood a man. He was tall, with kind eyes and a rugged, handsome face. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a high-end sweater and jeans. He looked at Lorelei with genuine adoration. "I agree," the man said. "Let's expand the library section too. I'll fund it personally." "You're too generous, Michael." Lorelei smiled, touching his arm gently. Gabriel felt a spike of jealousy so sharp it nearly doubled him over. but it was followed immediately by shame. He looked at himself, dirty, broken, holding a broom. He looked at them, clean, happy, building something real. He realized then that he had never really loved Lorelei. He had loved what she provided. He had loved the safety she offered. And because he didn't value her, he lost the only thing that was real in his life. One of the architects noticed Gabriel staring. "Hey, you get back to work. Stop gawking at the investors." Lorelei turned at the sound of the shout. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk. Her gaze landed on Gabriel. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Gabriel wanted to run. He wanted to hide. But he couldn't move. He waited for her to mock him. He waited for her to point him out to her new partner and laugh. "Look at the mighty king now." But Lorelei didn't laugh. Her expression softened. There was no anger left in her eyes, only a distant, mild sadness. It was the look one gives to a stranger who has fallen on hard times. She gave him a barely perceptible nod, an acknowledgement of a past life, and then turned away. "Shall we go inside?" Lorelei asked the group. "After you," Michael said. They walked into the building, leaving Gabriel alone on the sidewalk with his broom. Gabriel watched the door close. He took a deep breath. The air was cold, but for the first time in 6 months he didn't feel the suffocating weight of anger. He felt empty, but it was a clean emptiness. He looked at the broom in his hand. "Hey, Scott!" the foreman yelled again. "I'm coming," Gabriel called back. He turned and went back to work. 5 years had passed since the rain-soaked night Gabriel was thrown onto the pavement outside the Ventura Tower. The fluorescent lights of Miller's Hardware and Supply hummed with a low electric buzz, a sound that had become the soundtrack to Gabriel Scott's new life. He sat at a battered metal desk in the back corner of the store, the smell of sawdust machine oil and cut lumber filling the air. It was a far cry from the sandalwood and conditioned air of his executive suite, but strangely, Gabriel didn't mind. He was the assistant manager now. He earned $45,000 a year. He drove a 2016 Ford pickup with a dent in the rear bumper. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery that smelled of yeast every morning at 4:30 a.m. His life was small. It was contained. And for the first time in his existence, it was honest. He was currently reconciling the inventory for the plumbing aisle. There were no shell companies to hide losses in. There were no offshore accounts to juggle. There were just washers, PVC pipes, and brass fittings. If a bolt was missing, he found it. It was simple math, and the simplicity was a balm to his frazzled nerves. The bell above the front door jingled violently, shattering the quiet afternoon. Gabriel looked up from his clipboard to see a young man bursting into the store. He was dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, but his bow tie was crooked and his face was pale, slick with sweat. He looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Help!" the young man gasped, his eyes darting frantically around the aisles of hammers and paint cans. "Please, does anyone work here? I have an emergency." Gabriel stood up slowly, his knees popping slightly, a reminder of his time on the construction crew. He adjusted his green apron and walked around the counter. "Take a breath, son," Gabriel said, his voice calm and steady. "What's the emergency?" "I'm getting married in an hour." The kid stammered, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the counter. "I was showing my best man the rings outside, just checking them, and I dropped them. I dropped the bride's ring. It rolled right down the storm drain on the corner." The young man looked like he was about to cry. "I can see it down there, but I can't reach it. My arm isn't long enough. I don't know, a magnet, a claw. Anything." Gabriel looked at the kid. He saw the sheer terror in his eyes, the desperation of someone who thought his entire future was crumbling because of one mistake. He recognized that look. He had worn it himself the day the board fired him. "It's okay," Gabriel said, stepping out from behind the counter. "We can fix this. I've got an industrial-strength telescoping magnet in aisle 4, and some high-test fishing line if that doesn't work." "Oh, thank God," The kid breathed, slumping slightly with relief. You have no idea. My fiancée, she deserves the perfect day. I'm trying to give her everything, you know. The perfect ring, the perfect wedding. If I ruin this, I ruin everything. Gabriel paused. He stopped walking and turned to face the young man. The words hung in the air. I'm trying to give her everything. Let me give you some advice, Gabriel said softly. The kid looked up, blinking. What? Don't try to give her everything, Gabriel said. His voice was rougher now, weighted with the heavy stones of his past. Things can be lost. Rings can fall down drains. Money can disappear overnight. If you try to build your marriage on giving her things, you're building it on sand. He looked the young man in the eye. Just give her yourself. Be honest. Be there. If you lost the ring, tell her. If she loves you, she won't care about the gold. She'll care that you're standing at the altar. The kid stared at him, stunned. The panic in his face slowly ebbed away, replaced by a thoughtful silence. That's actually really good advice. I was so worried about the object I forgot about her. I learned it the hard way, Gabriel said with a wry, sad smile. Now, come on. Let's go fish that gold out of the gutter. They went outside to the street corner. Gabriel didn't mind kneeling on the dirty pavement in his work clothes. He guided the magnet down the grate, his hand steady until he heard the satisfying clink of metal on metal. He pulled the line up and the diamond ring sparkled in the afternoon sun, dripping with murky water. You are a lifesaver. The kid wiped the ring off with his handkerchief, his hands trembling with joy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $50 bill. Here, please, take it. It's all I have on me. Gabriel pushed the hand away gently. Keep it. Buy her flowers. Or better yet, put it in a savings account. As the kid sprinted off toward the church looking lighter than air, Gabriel stood alone on the corner. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the street. He walked back into the store and locked the door behind him. It was closing time. As he tidied up the counter, his eyes fell on a discarded newspaper left by a customer earlier that day. He picked it up to throw it in the recycling bin, but the photo on the front page stopped him. It was Lorelei. She was standing at a podium holding a crystal plaque. The headline read, Lorelei Scott named Philanthropist of the Decade. She looked older. There were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. But she looked strong. She looked happy. There was a peace in her expression that Gabriel had never seen when they were married. A peace that came from living a life that was truly her own. Gabriel stared at the photo for a long time. In the past, this would have filled him with bitter rage. He would have felt cheated. But standing there in the quiet of the hardware store, surrounded by tools used to build and repair, he felt something else entirely. Respect. She had won. She had beaten him, stripped him down, and forced him to rebuild himself from the ground up. And in doing so, she had inadvertently saved him from the hollow shell he used to be. Good for you, Lorelei, he whispered to the empty room. He folded the paper carefully and placed it in the bin. He didn't need to read the article. He knew the story. Gabriel turned off the main lights, plunging the store into shadow. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a king. He was just a man who sold hammers and lived above a bakery. But as he walked out into the cool evening air, Gabriel Scott realized that for the first time in his life, he was free. What a journey for Gabriel and Lorelei. It's a powerful reminder that arrogance builds castles on sand, while integrity builds them on stone. Gabriel thought his value came from his bank account, but he only found peace when he lost it all. And Lorelei. She proved that true power doesn't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes it just needs to sign the right checks. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and ultimate redemption, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. What did you think of Lorelei's revenge? Was it too harsh, or did Gabriel get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading them, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.